Hey, what's up, everybody? Derek Wetmore, Matthew Coller here with you on the Sports Take Show, where we take about sports. Today's Sports Take, Matthew, is about the Vikings, and it's about their perceived struggles here. It's not perceived struggles. They're very real collapse and struggles over the past 4 games, falling to a 5-4 record. Is this team still a Super Bowl contender? And I'll frame that a different way, actually. What percentage chance would you give the Minnesota Vikings right now at 5-4 of making the Super Bowl?
I will go a 3% chance of making the Super Bowl at this point.
3%.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't want to go Derek Wetmore and say non-zero.
That was my answer. How did you know?
Because usually when you say non-zero, it refers to something that is very close.
Yeah, like
to 0.0005.
0.0005.
Like when you said that there's a non-zero chance that you could play Major League Baseball. No, that's 0.
That's because somebody challenged me on it, just to be clear.
But that is a 0.
They said there's a non-zero chance of anything, like a non-zero chance you could play Major League Baseball. And I said, now you're coming around on it. It was very sarcastic.
But with the Vikings, there's 32 teams, and right now we're down to probably about 18 of them who would still have some percentage of a chance. And if we're waiting, the Cowboys and the Patriots and the Seahawks, the better teams, the Falcons.
The Steelers are on that list.
There are quite a few that I would put ahead of the Vikings right now, but I wouldn't put them at 0. So let's say you have to give a huge chunk to the Patriots. They're at like 30% or 20% that they're going to win the Super Bowl, and then everybody else gets the scraps to make 100% out of those other 17 teams. So the Vikings are in the scraps of teams that could still do it, and somebody like the Browns or the Bears, they are at your non-zero chance.
No.
So maybe 3%, 5%, but after the last 4 weeks, that percentage has dropped pretty significantly from where we would have had them in Week 5.
See, that's where non-zero breaks down, because the Cleveland Browns have a 0% chance of winning this year's Super Bowl.
Right, because they can't make the playoffs.
0%.
So it is 0% because they can't.
Very easy to say that.
They can't make the playoffs.
Okay, so let's back off that a little bit. Let's just talk about the NFC, or even the NFC North. Let's talk about the division, because we've seen the Packers falling apart. We have now seen the Lions up close and personal. In that close game, the Vikings lost in overtime. And frankly, I mean, probably got outplayed, but not by a significant margin. Do you think the Vikings still win the NFC North?
I say coin flip on that. I'll go 50% chance that they still win the NFC North. These last 2 games have been coin flip games within themselves. I mean, if it comes up heads, then you win these 2 games, and all of a sudden you're 7-2, and everyone's talking about you as the best team in the NFC. And if instead it came up tails in both games where things did not go their way, especially in the Detroit game was a lot of luck, but in the Washington game, it wasn't just pure that team handed it to you and you had no chance. It was coming down to the final drive, and it was a linebacker tips the ball up in the air and catches it with one hand for an interception. A lot of times that guy doesn't catch that, or a lot of times you get a yard on 3rd and 1 where the Vikings didn't instead. And little things had to go into them losing by an overtime margin, and then on the last drive by 6 points and a couple of field goals by Washington. Those games could have gone either way almost to the very end. And so I don't look at those as ones that would say this team is a complete disaster and has fallen apart and there's no chance that they could win the NFC North. No, I think there's a very good chance they could win the NFC North, especially because I don't look at Detroit as being any type of powerhouse. But they are good enough to win 4 or 5 more games and take the division if the Vikings don't get back on track.
If you were writing home and saying, hey, let's plan our family vacation for late January, are you telling the family, hey, hold off, or hey, go without me, I'm going to be covering the Vikings playoffs? Or, I mean, you just talked about winning the division. Like, I get the percentage, 50-50 fine, but if I were putting you on to planning a family vacation, that is your impetus. So I hate when people say gun to your head, what do you choose? Like, well, get the gun out of my face. I don't want to choose under this kind of pressure. But planning family vacation up against your head, are you covering the playoffs?
Are we talking about playoffs or a playoff game?
Get a playoff game.
I think they'll get a playoff game.
Okay.
But when you lose 4 in a row, you have no solid ground to stand on to prove that until you prove that.
And I think the way in which you lose, too, matters. I think in 2 of those games they got outplayed, just flat out, and they were not the better team, which they'd been used to being through the first 5 weeks.
And the only reason that I can't just completely throw those aside and put them on Norv Turner is that defensively, they did not play very good against Washington. They didn't play perfect against Chicago, and they had their moments of melting down against Detroit. And that was not the case in most of their early games. Most of the early games, it was lights-out defense. It was causing turnovers. It was getting sacks. It was playing as well as anybody in the league. It was number 1 ranked across the board. And now everybody's backing off and saying, oh, well, we're not the 85 Bears. We're not the 85 Bears, which is kind of saying, hey, offense, you need to pick it up a little bit too. But if this is the type of defense, what we saw against Washington is the type of defense we're going to see the rest of the way, then I say every game, favored or not, is kind of a coin flip. And if it doesn't come up their way, then I am not going to be telling the family about that vacation. But I would say that I wouldn't book it. I would not book the vacation right now because I still think there's a better chance they make the playoffs than they don't.
So monitor the deals, but maybe don't book the flight.